This week we have no Jared Goff, no Jalen Hurts, no Justin Herbert. We were already going to be without Tua, and now Anthony Richardson may not play. And let's just add to the fact that there's multiple other starting quarterbacks right now that shouldn't even be near your fantasy lineups. So are you struggling to find a quarterback option for here in week 5? I'm going to break down every matchup for you, and hopefully whether you're streaming or you need a new starter, this video will give you some insight onto who will be the best bet for your lineup. Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? Hopefully you didn't spend a super early pick on a quarterback, but if you did, hopefully you picked someone that's been super effective and really stable in your fantasy lineup. But if you're dealing with injuries, if you're dealing with ineffectiveness, or now you've got to deal with the buys, this video may be really important to not only figure out who we're trusting in week 5, but maybe you need a new starting quarterback moving forward. And Thursday Night Football is going to have one of the biggest surprises of the season, Baker Mayfield, who's already up to quarterback 3 on the season. The most passing yards in a game allowed by Atlanta so far this season is 235. In fact, they held Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts under that mark in back-to-back weeks for week 2 and week 3. Also, over the last 3 weeks, they've created 4 turnovers on defense. This is a way tougher matchup than what people believe. But here's the thing, Baker Mayfield is currently the quarterback 3 on the season. And at what point in time should we be sitting the quarterback 3 in week 5? Typically never. This week, you're deploying Baker Mayfield if you have him. Just know that his upside definitely is limited this week, depending on how this game plays out. Thursday Night Football can always be weird, and we already know that this is going to be a tougher matchup. So for both of those reasons, maybe just lock it in that Baker Mayfield doesn't have the typical ceiling that we've seen so far this season. Tampa Bay's defense has only allowed 1 passing touchdown this season, and they're about middle of the pack when it comes to passing yards allowed. They've allowed a ton of fantasy points though, so this looks like a really good matchup, but that's because they've allowed a lot of rushing yards on the ground to quarterbacks. Unfortunately, Kirk Cousins probably isn't going to be taking advantage of that too often this week. On Thursday Night Football, this is not a matchup where I would want to play Kirk Cousins hoping for a huge upside. For me, I'm hoping he can break about 235 yards and find the end zone at least once while limiting the turnovers. Prior to that rainy and sloppy game in week 4, Aaron Rodgers was looking way more like himself, with back-to-back games with 2 touchdowns and no interceptions. And even with the unpredictability that an international game will bring for Aaron Rodgers this week, I expect him to get back on track. Minnesota is currently allowing the most passing yards to quarterbacks. They just aren't allowing a ton of scoring and causing turnovers. And even though Sam Darnold looks like an MVP candidate, I know, just think about those words for a second. He's going up against a really tough Jets defense now. The Jets are currently allowing the 4th fewest passing yards and 2nd fewest fantasy points to the quarterback position. Sam Darnold could really have a low ceiling this week. He's got Justin Jefferson, so anything is possible. But unfortunately, whatever Justin Jefferson gets may be the bulk of the fantasy production for this week. After his first start of the season, it looked like Andy Dalton was going to be the quarterback savior we all needed this season. I don't know if this week is going to continue that trend, however. Going up against Chicago, who is currently allowing the fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks, is going to be a tough matchup. And I could end up seeing him actually going lower than his current line over on Underdog of 220.5 passing yards. Without multiple touchdowns this week, Andy Dalton really doesn't have a whole lot of upside. Now, negative game script could really end up helping him out. But unfortunately, the upside in this matchup just does not appear to be there. Caleb Williams is a low risk this week, not because of his ceiling, but because of his floor. Every single week, he seems to get a little bit better and a little bit better, and now he has all of his offensive weapons healthy. Carolina's defense can't stop anything at this point. So Caleb Williams, even if it's a positive game script, and even if they run the ball a whole lot more, could make up for all of that with a big first half to put Carolina in a deficit. Who doesn't love a great battle between Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow? And even though Cincinnati's defense is currently allowing the 9th fewest passing yards on the season, they've been really up and down. They got torched by Jayden Daniels while looking like all-pro defense another week against Patrick Mahomes. So while I expect a little bit of a lower ceiling this week, it's about that rushing ability that makes up for some of those passing yards that we may not find, and why he continues to have a really solid floor. But Joe Burrow has a great opportunity to put up big numbers this week. Cincinnati's defense currently allowing the 3rd most passing yards, even if quarterbacks have trouble finishing drives and finding the end zone through the air. But the biggest concern about Joe Burrow this offseason was the health of his wrist. That doesn't seem to be a problem. Right now he's got 7 touchdowns to only 1 interception and should have another big day against Baltimore. The New England and Miami matchup really boils down to 2 things: which team runs the ball better and which team's quarterback sucks less. I mean, New England's allowing the 5th most passing yards in the NFL right now, but I don't care if it's Skylar Thompson or Tyler Huntley. If it's not Tua, I'm not even gonna contemplate it. And Miami's defense is allowing the 4th fewest passing yards and 3rd fewest fantasy points right now to quarterbacks. But I don't think Jacoby Brissett is going to go anywhere near his line currently set on underdog at 158.5 yards. They're going to run the crap out of the football for New England this week. That defense is still pretty tough, even though Miami has looked like garbage on offense, and Jacoby Brisket isn't going to be cooking like brisket. The Washington defense is currently allowing the most fantasy points and passing touchdowns to the quarterback position. But Deshaun Watson hasn't shown us any type of ceiling all season long. He's had a couple of decent games, and he's had a solid floor at times, and that's great in this matchup if that's what you're looking for. But if you're looking for any type of a ceiling that's going to put him up towards the top maybe 8 or 6 quarterbacks, I just can't bank on that until I start seeing it on a more regular basis. But if Watson is currently on your waiver wire and you need someone to fill in for you this week, at least it's an easy matchup. This could end up being one of the tougher matchups that Jayden Daniels has had so far. But Cincinnati was supposed to be a tougher matchup a couple of weeks ago, and look how that turned out. Really, it's about turnovers. If Jayden Daniels limits the turnovers in this matchup, you should see him with the same type of ceiling that he's had all season long. Now, if he were to turn the ball over, obviously that ceiling comes down a little bit, but he's going to make up for that with his legs. If he can find the end zone on the ground and through the air, definitely should be another solid day for Daniels. The big question for Indianapolis right now is who's going to start at the quarterback position. As of this recording, Anthony Richardson had told reporters that he's a little sore from an oblique injury that he suffered, but it didn't seem to be serious. But that doesn't mean that he's going to be out on the field this week either. Right now, he's listed as a high risk. If he were to end up playing, he goes to a medium risk because he still could re-aggravate that injury, even though this is a really solid matchup. Joe Flacco, on the other hand, is a super low risk. Jacksonville's defense has had trouble stopping quarterbacks all season long, and going up against Joe Flacco with the weapons that he would have at his disposal this week, that could end up happening once again, especially if there's no Jonathan Taylor and Indianapolis ends up throwing the ball a little bit more often. Now, even though Indianapolis is allowing the 5th most passing yards and the 3rd most fantasy points to quarterbacks, Trevor Lawrence doesn't have a huge upside, and that's because of his completion percentage. He's not completing a ton of passes right now. Out of all of the qualifying quarterbacks from this season so far, he has the 2nd lowest. That is not good and needs to get cleaned up quickly. It could end up happening this week against Indianapolis, but it is still a risk nonetheless. Another exciting quarterback battle in the AFC with Josh Allen and CJ Stroud going head to head. The Houston defense, it's a little weird taking a look at their passing defense right now, because they've allowed the 7th fewest passing yards, but they are tied for the 3rd most passing touchdowns allowed this season. So while some of the yards may be tough to come by at times, finding the end zone shouldn't be. And Josh Allen, with one of the biggest arms in the NFL, should have an opportunity to find some of those big plays that Houston has given up this season. Buffalo's pass defense has looked pretty good at times this season. Now, last week, Baltimore just ran the ball on them the entire time. So some of their stats may be a little bit skewed, but they could cause some turnovers this week with CJ Stroud. And that's why he's listed as a medium risk, because his ceiling might be a little bit more towards like quarterback 8 through 14 than it would be quarterback like 1 through 6. And I just want to set everybody up for success. When you play CJ Stroud this week, he's absolutely in your lineup. He's got a really solid floor. It's just the ceiling that I'm worried about in this one. There's not going to be a ton of analysis for this matchup. I'm not going with Gardner Minshew. Denver's defense has been super solid this season. They're allowing the 5th fewest passing yards and the 8th fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterback. Not only that, but Gardner Minshew darn near lost his job a couple of weeks ago. I'm not going to be starting a guy that's on the brink of losing his job and potentially getting pulled in the middle of a game. And for Bo Nix, he just doesn't have any real upside. Yeah, he runs a little bit, but the passing game is just so poor for Denver right now, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to try and start him. He's barely completing 60% of his passes right now, and he's barely averaging 4.8 yards per attempt. There's just no pushing the ball down the field, there's no looking for big plays, and a majority of what Bo Nix does is a dump off. It is a little bit troubling that after a historic performance back in week 2, that Kyler Murray is only the quarterback 22 while facing Detroit and Washington the last 2 weeks. And I'm sorry, but no one has had trouble throwing against those secondaries for the most part this season, so Kyler Murray should definitely be playing a whole lot better. But this San Francisco matchup isn't going to get much easier either, so hopefully he can find a little bit of a better floor this week. Because even if he's not going to have a huge ceiling, Kyler Murray is a guy that we are looking to right now for consistent fantasy production. Jordan Love looked a little rusty to get things started last week, but his numbers ended up being absolutely fine by the end of the game. So we're absolutely going to fire him up, going up against an offense that has allowed the 3rd most passing touchdowns and 4th most fantasy points to the quarterback position. Once again, Jordan Love has a terrific ceiling. And Matthew Stafford has a little bit of a better ceiling. This matchup going up against Green Bay is a lot more favorable than what it was going up against Chicago last week. He doesn't have his main weapon, so his ceiling isn't nearly as high as it once was, but if you're looking for someone to fill in for you, Stafford could still give you a decent floor. Seattle had one of the best pass defenses in all of football through the first 3 weeks, and then Detroit said, absolutely not, let's take care of that. Now, they were missing some players. Seattle's secondary had some injuries, and maybe that had something to do with it, but maybe they aren't a top 10 pass defense like we had originally seen. But it doesn't really matter. They're going up against Daniel Jones and the New York Giants this week. Devin Witherspoon is probably going to be on Malik Nabers if he ends up playing, and this is going to be a tough matchup for Daniel Jones to find any type of consistent footing to be able to push the ball down the field and be able to find a high upside. And Geno Smith is coming off a huge game in Detroit, a franchise record for most passing attempts in a game. That was a fun game to watch. And Seattle is every bit as fun as any other offense at the NFL level right now. Go ahead and lock him in as a safe start this week, and he's definitely going to be a guy that has earned our trust moving forward. So for the Dallas and Pittsburgh game, Dak Prescott's performance, I'm not really evaluating Dak Prescott. I'm evaluating the defense that shows up for the Pittsburgh Steelers. If it's the Steelers defense last week against Indianapolis, Dak Prescott's going to be fine. He's going to be a top 12 quarterback. He's going to have a couple of touchdowns, and he's definitely going to give you the upside that you need at the position. If the Pittsburgh defense that played the first 3 weeks stopping everybody and their mother, then you're going to get a Dak Prescott that may have a tough time getting into the top 12. If Pittsburgh's defense ends up playing Dak really, really tough this week, then we need to hope for negative game script for the Dallas Cowboys. If that happens, then we get enough passing opportunities out of Dak Prescott to make up for the lack of efficiency that he may end up seeing and any turnovers that may be caused. Justin Fields' resurgence is incredible. Currently the quarterback 6. He's only thrown 1 interception, and he's completed 70% of his passes this year. Add in the fact, no DeMarcus Lawrence and no Micah Parsons, and Justin Fields becomes my Manscaped must-start quarterback of the week. And you can make fun of Arthur Smith and the Steelers offense all you want to. I know that I do, but Justin Fields has been a bright spot for them so far, and he absolutely deserves to keep the starting job. And now going up against Dallas, he could have a super solid day. And Justin Fields is a do-it-all tool for the Pittsburgh Steelers offense, just the way Manscaped offers tons of do-it-all tools for you to take care of yourself. And if you're looking to add some new tools to your roster, head on over to manscaped.com, use code word headliners20 at checkout, and you're gonna get 20% off your entire order and free shipping. But over on Underdog right now, Justin Fields' passing line is set at 185.5 yards. He's passed that 2 of the last 3 games, and now he's facing a team that's missing their top 2 pass rushers. Yeah, give me some Justin Fields this week to have an absolutely huge day through the air and on the ground. He is a potential top 5 quarterback option. Between Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and Xavier Worthy, how many big plays could we potentially see out of the wide receivers on Monday Night Football? The Kansas City Chiefs are allowing the 10th most passing yards right now, and that's one area that they've had troubles with, big plays. And that's where Rashid Shaheed excels. Derek Carr is going to take his shots down the field in this game, and it would not shock me if he puts up some pretty decent passing yards to go along with a really safe floor in a matchup where who knows what happens. New Orleans has blown out a couple of teams so far this season. If Kansas City cannot get their offense going and it happens again, maybe the ceiling for Derek Carr is a little bit lower and they run it with Alvin Kamara and Jamal Williams again. There's a wide range of outcomes here, but regardless of what happens, I still do think Derek Carr has a solid floor. Now, New Orleans is currently allowing the 8th most passing yards to quarterbacks, and part of the reason why is because they put their opponents in a negative game script so often this season. But they're one of only 2 teams that have only allowed 1 passing touchdown this season, and they allow the 4th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes this week, at best, may end up being a high-end quarterback too. And I can't believe that I'm saying this, but let's say you own Justin Fields and Patrick Mahomes, I would play Fields over Mahomes pretty easily. Yo, Headliner Nation, there you have it. All of the start and sit analysis for week 5 is now in the books. Make sure you check out our other videos to check out that analysis and see what I had to say about the other positions. We've got rankings, live shows. Dr. Ethan's got his information about injuries coming out later in the week. But we appreciate you. Thanks so much for being here still in week 5. It means a ton to us. Continue to watch all season and all year long. We don't go anywhere. We do football content literally all season long. For now, though, I'm going to head on out. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.
I'm a headliner.